Previously on the Steven Hour, we looked at the episode Instant Freeze. Now we look at Rats Like Cheese, the second part in Mr. Freeze's debut. Now last time, Mr. Freeze had returned, sparking a crime wave in his goal to get enough funds to keep him in this cool environment in order to survive, whilst at the same time humiliating and getting revenge on Batman for being the person responsible for putting him in this condition. As a result, we end the episode with Batman and Robin being frozen. We then, of course, get to the usual opening credits. That quickly wraps up, and then we get to the episode. The police department then takes them to the hospital, still frozen, and puts them in this special chamber designed to slowly lower the temperature in order to slowly unfreeze them. Time passes by and they get out. One of the first times where Batman and Robin actually are put in a trap there was no way they could have gotten out of, but they got out of it purely based out of not just sheer luck, but by the police department of all people, as usually they are often seen as nothing more than incompetent. And so I find that to be genuinely surprising, but a good change of pace. Mr. Freeze, of course, finds out that Batman and Robin are alive, but he still plans to put his final plan into finally getting rid of Batman and Robin. As a result, Bruce Wayne, Dick Grayson, Aunt Harriet, and Alfred, along with the princess from the previous episode, go to a baseball game, where one of the main pitchers was actually introduced in the first episode at Wayne Manor in the opening moments of the previous episode as the main baseball player. Just as everyone's there, it's over the announcement that he's practically been kidnapped, and then they see in the sky the writings, "Strike 3 Batman, you're out." Realizing that, Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson quickly leave, bringing up the excuse that he has to quickly go to a board meeting. He then quickly leaves and goes to police headquarters, where it is revealed that the baseball player has been kidnapped with a bit of ice left at the crime scene. It indicated that Mr. Freeze was there. Mr. Freeze then, of course, calls up the police department and has a ransom. In exchange for the baseball player's safety, he exchanges a trade between the baseball player and, of course, Batman. Though Gordon and Chief O'Hara are heavily against this, Batman realizes he has nothing to do but turn himself in to Mr. Freeze's demands. However, and he also gives Robin explicit orders not to follow, to stay out of this. However, Robin being Robin and can't bear to see him not at all get involved, at least stay out of it and let Batman essentially go toward his doom, he then, of course, secretly has a tracking device on Batman and quickly follows him. Batman, of course, surrenders himself to Mr. Freeze's thugs, but the baseball player is, exchanged for Batman's safety. Robin then, of course, makes sure that the baseball player is safe and continues following. We then cut to a scene where we are at Mr. Freeze's hideout. And then, of course, here is a really unique and intense scene where basically Batman is basically prisoner in this hot path. The heater that's basically keeping him alive. And when he attempts to even step out of it and even take on Mr. Freeze, of course, he realized that the cold immediately goes through his gloves, and it's just not a smart move to do. He then tries to go again, takes on Mr. Freeze, and of course he's easily pretty much on the floor, shivering, and Mr. Freeze is almost relishing in it, saying that now he knows how it feels to go into an environment where he's not wanted. Automatically, I just like that. But of course, Mr. Freeze saying it's too easy and there's no way he's going to do it like that, so he turns off the freezing device. And as a result, he then, of course, directs him to the dining room table where they plan to have dinner. And just as he enters, guess who's in the chair? Robin. It turns out that Robin was captured as well, and of course there's this scene where Mr. Freeze, Batman, and Robin are eating and having a nice conversation. Batman pleads for Mr. Freeze to let go of Robin. Mr. Freeze said he would gladly do so, but he now knows his hideout, so what can he do? Batman then pleads to at least give himself up, promising that they have the finest medical attention needed to cure his condition. This was a bad move, as this sets him off, saying that there's no way he could get the help in prison. After all, it is his fault he is like this. He then goes rambling how he can never again feel the warmth of the summer breeze, the hot wind in his face. He is forever stuck in this environment, and he needs revenge. And revenge he shall have. Next thing you know, Batman and Robin try to quickly do away with, try to take on Freeze, but of course, that Robin slips on Baked Alaska, and of course ends up freezing. Batman then realizes, instead of going after Mr. Freeze, he needs to quickly get Robin to at least a warm temperature quickly. He then puts him in this hot area, and then of course Freeze then of course has a little fun with this by slowly having the heat or limited heat going until only there's enough room for only one. Just as there's only a very small space, they both quickly get out of the space in the cold, but Batman forces Robin into the heat and tells him to stay there. Mr. Freeze is enjoying this moment until eventually Batman knocks him out and takes away his device, and of course makes the whole room heat. It turns out Batman was only wearing, bat thermals under his costume designed to make him withstand the cold. Mr. Freeze is of course begging to be put in cold temperature, as he's not allowed a hot temperature, which of course Batman and Robin allow him to do. Next thing you know, a bunch of Mr. Freeze's hoods come in and start firing their guns. Batman of course turns the cold temperature on them, resulting in them having to drop their guns as they can't stand the cold as well. Of course, next thing you know, they drop the guns. Mr. Freeze is stuck in this small corner, and the final bat fight of this two-parter breaks out. Batman and Robin of course quickly win, and of course Chief O'Hara and the police department come in through the back door. Robin asking why did it take him so long when he called them in literally an hour ago. But Chief O'Hara says they took a wrong turn on the Route 49. We then end the episode with the baseball player, the princess, Bruce Wayne and Harriet, and Dick Grayson at this party, basically, just having fun. And the episode would end with Aunt Harriet said that they've made dessert, and they will show what the dessert is. And guess what it is? Baked Alaska. You get a little bit of chuckle out of it. The episode then ends telling us that we will be facing a new villain, Zelda the Great. Of course, the cast basically remains the same, the main cast at least. Chief O'Hara and Commissioner Gordon, of course, play their usual, honest cops and good cops, but they're also bumbling idiots. They rely too much on Batman and Robin. Here, Batman, of course, still carries the guilt of causing Mr. Freeze's condition, but here he still tries to implore to turn himself in, promising that he would get help. And of course, we also here see a character development of Robin, and that he's a bit impulsive, and he sometimes lets his emotions definitely get the better of him. Something I really like. Of course, Alfred here plays the role of Alfred, and of course helps Dick in this capacity, and Aunt Harriet is the nice, charming, just nice little aunt that everyone wished they had. Overall, I really must admit, the two-parter here really showed some bit of character development, or at least character insight to Batman. He takes on the criminals, yeah, but here's the first time where he feels guilt for creating one of the city's biggest villains. Just as we got a bit of character development with, or at least a new thing in the previous episodes with the city against Batman, here we get something interesting where Batman feels guilt for creating one of the city's biggest criminals. And here we get to see something with Burt Ward's Robin, first off, that he is a teenager. He has this energy. He's gladly, willing, and that's just shown in his fight how he's just full of energy and is basically a teen. But here, I like that we get to see that as teens, he makes mistakes and sometimes lets his emotions get the better of him, more so than Batman ever did. something I really like. And of course, Mr. Freeze. Here in the first part, we understand Mr. Freeze's motivations, and we get that from the get-go. But here, we also get to see something else here. George Sanders here also shows that Mr. Freeze, though he wants to destroy him, he wants revenge. There is a moment where he shows a bit of not just sympathy for when Batman says to let go of Robin, saying that it was, just please let him go. The thing I really like is he shows a bit of admiration and a bit of respect for Batman. But of course, as soon as he mentions prison and possibly getting help, he probably thinks as a scientist, no way someone can help him. It's too far for that. So I kind of like that. For me, George Sanders is, out of all the three Mr. Freezes, the most human and the most sympathetic. You see, even I admit, the next incarnations of the character do choose something different, but the sympathy factor drops so much there's barely any left. But then of course they make it work for their incarnations, but we get to when we get to later Mr. Freeze episodes down the line. Overall, Rats Like Cheese for me is just another good two-parter. It picks up a lot of what was great about the first one and goes along with it. I like the production value, and here how Batman and Robin are in Mr. Freeze's hideout at the latter part of the episode, and how they have to try and cope within this world that they're in. It's just a unique world. Overall, for me, the Mr. Freeze first ever two-parter is, in my opinion, two of the series' best episodes, and honestly, is in my top 10 favorite episodes of Batman 66. It is just such a great and fantastic episodes. And honestly, I just like how, for me, the first season of the show really is just getting more bolder and bolder. See, the first two episodes were kind of normal and average episodes, enjoyable but nothing hugely spectacular. The Joker episode slightly picks it up and so it becomes there. Here by this time they fully have, really, in my opinion, really raised the bar. And Mr. Freeze is such a great villain. As he's a bit sympathetic as Batman, feels guilty for creating one of the city's biggest villains, but also how Mr. Freeze is a villain who admires Batman a bit, whilst at the same time wants revenge. Is the other villain, and that's his sole motivation. He is a villain who is almost as cold-hearted, with revenge on his mind, but he does show some compassion and almost humanity once in a while. George Sanders does the role very well, and I like the German accent. It just goes very well with this character, and having him have an accent for me just personally works well. And there we have it. Batman episode Rats Like Cheese. These two, the end to the Mr. Freeze two-parter, a really great episode, and honestly just a really great introduction to a villain in general. However, we will get to more Mr. Freeze episodes later on in the series, where I want to point out something that I kind of find to be a little bit slightly annoying with the character. Join us next time on Batman 66 when we review the episode The Zelda the Great, first ever episode. So until then, tune in next time on the same Steven hour, same Steven channel.